So, in this episode, we'll be going over the how and trying to answer this question of how we go about language development. And this is really a conversation that will continue throughout further conversations that I hope to have together. But this is something that I put together for a faculty professional development, and so it's really a broad overview. So, we're going to look at briefly how to write a language objective, what a language objective is, as well as looking at Marzano's 6 steps to vocabulary development. So, without further ado, I bring you the third part of our series, Language and Vocabulary. All right, so welcome back to part 3 here of our language and vocabulary. So let's review real quick about what we've done so far. We've looked briefly at what the nature of language is, looking at Noam Chomsky's view of the nature of language. We looked at the why. Why do we even have a focus of language development in public education? The Supreme Court case of Blau versus Nichols. And now we're going to look at how. How do we go about? What is some small steps we can start to take to address language development in our classrooms? And again, this is a presentation that I did with teachers at my local school, and these are 2 things we're working on implementing in our school and in our district, and that's language objectives and what we call an academic vocabulary program, which is based on Marzano's 6 steps to academic vocabulary development. So let's look at first is what are language objectives? I can remember when I first came across language objectives, they were very fuzzy. I didn't get it. I was like, I don't understand language objective. But try to think of it this way, that you have your content objective, that is the material that you're learning. And I think of the language objective is, what is the tool? Think of the language as the tool that you're going to use. What language tool do you need to use in order to work with this content? Remember, there are 4 domains to language. There's listening, there's speaking, there's reading, and there's writing. So in our language objective, we're going to choose one of those domains to be our tool that we're going to be using to work at either understanding or communicating our learning of that material, if that makes sense. So it's a separate objective. So if you are writing your objectives for your lesson, we're talking about a separate objective. You have your content objective, but also adding a language objective. It's a fundamental part of sheltered instruction, content-based instruction. It's basically guiding you. It's guiding you and helping you think explicitly about how you're going to focus on language in the learning. So let's look at an example. And I'm just going to show you an example, and then I'm going to give you a frame, and I'm going to break it down for you so that you can see how each part works. So here is an example. This is based off of a math standard, a simple geometry standard of how many sides go with geometric shapes. Okay, so the language objective might be, I will talk about how many sides a triangle and square have with my partner. You don't have to make this very, very complicated. You can make this simple, okay? And making it simple is probably making it better. This obviously goes with the speaking domain, right? Here's another example. I will write a personal narrative in my writing journal. Well, what domain does that go with? It goes with writing. All right, so there's 3 steps to do this. And I got this, you can see down here on the slide from Dr. Jose Medina. Shared this information on his social media, and I thought it was very helpful. So what are the 3 steps? Step 1 is to identify a verb that relates to 4 plus 1. All right, so what is 4 plus 1? Remember, how many language domains are there? 4 language domains. So the 4 is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Now, there's a lot of different verbs that can go with speaking, to describe, to tell, to discuss. There are a lot of different verbs that you can choose for each one of those domains. But you're going to choose a verb that goes with one of the 4 language domains. And he also adds a plus 1. So this is particularly important for bilingual education, where you're going to be doing interlinguistic connections. You're also going to be using translanguaging strategies, where students are really going to be able to access both of their languages in order to what's the word I'm looking for? Use all of their language that they have, not just the target language of instruction, but the language that they also bring to the classroom that may not be the target language of instruction. Okay? So, step 2, what's that? You're going to link it to the content standard. So you're going to choose language domain verb. You're going to link to the standard. Okay? And then step 3 is you're going to add an interaction. So what is the language domain? What is the standard? And what is the interaction going to be? Okay? It could be with the partner. It could be with a graphic organizer. It could be with a journal, teacher, table group. It just depends on what you're doing. Okay? But the important part is to add that interaction. So here's the frame. I will, whatever, speak, read, discuss, review, write about whatever the content standard is, enter with in the interaction, okay? We've already looked at this one. Okay, the speaking one. We've already looked at this writing one. All right, I will preview a Just Right book with my teacher in a small group. That would be reading, right? I will identify letters from sounds my teacher says. That would be listening. I will explain even in odd numbers to my table group. That would be speaking. So, again, whatever your content standard is, think about that. What language domains are we going to be using? You're going to link it to the standard and add an interaction. And that's your language objective for that lesson. Okay, so in the training, this is where teachers would get together and work together and practice writing some language objectives, and we would look at them and talk about them and share them. All right, so again, here's where we are. We've gone through the first 3 things here, and now we're going to move on to, real quickly, what is the academic vocabulary program. So this is another small way that we can begin to address the issue of how are we going about being explicit about language instruction in the classroom. And remember, we're not teaching like memorized language. We're not teaching grammar rules when we talk about language. When we're talking about language, we're talking about what's fundamental to understanding the learning. What's fundamental to understanding the concepts, the ideas, the material, the lessons. Okay? That's what we're talking about with language. Okay? So here's what we did in the training. We looked at a 2nd grade science word, force. And so we're going to use this word throughout our examples here of Marzano's 6 steps to vocabulary development. And we're going to go through these 6 steps. So I find the first 3 to really what I focus on mostly, and then 4 really at the end. And 5 and 6 are just kind of some continued interaction. But let's look at what they are. All right, so step 1, what are you going to do? Well, this is where we're going to need to start provide that comprehensible input. All right, so we're going to show the word, like the word force. All right, we're going to provide a description or an explanation, but also going to show some visuals to go with it. All right, or anything. You're basically building background knowledge. Who has heard of the word force before? What is a force? You're trying to get the students thinking about what experiences they may or may not have had with this word, and then showing them visuals. So I might do this. This might be something I would show the students, and we would read it together. Say force. Say, everybody, we're going to read it together. We practice saying the word force, and then we would read together. Force can be a push or a pull that can make something move. And then we would look at the pictures, okay? I might talk them through the pictures. These arrows here, they show where the motion is going. This person is pushing. This person is pulling. Kicking the ball. Is that a push or a pull? Okay, and so then I'm going to give students like 30 to 45 seconds to talk with a partner or at their table group to talk about these pictures and to try to use the word force as they're talking about it and what they see. Okay, so you're trying to get them to start understanding for themselves based on this visual support what this word means. Okay, so this is what step 2 is that now they're starting to have a conversation with the visual support, so the input, okay, the visual input, and now they're trying to explain what they understand that visual input to be with their peers. Okay, I'm not asking, for them to recite a definition. No, I want them to be able to explain it in their own words. Okay, 30 to 45 seconds. That's it. Bring the whole group back, and then I'm just going to randomly choose on a student, maybe the popsicle sticks or whatever it is, however you randomly choose on students, for them to share what they talked about with their partner. They can share what their idea was. Maybe they can share what their partner's idea was. Okay, then we'll go around the room and look for, do you agree with what they're saying? Do you maybe agree? Do you not agree? Okay, so you're trying to guide the conversation here to get to a good understanding of the word. So you keep, might pull a few more sticks until you feel like the class sort of overall has a good understanding of that. A force makes something move, a push and pull that makes something move. Okay, so it's important if someone says something that's just way off task, you're not going to want to say, no, that's incorrect. You might want to hear more from them. You might want to see what they're thinking that. You might want to draw them back to the picture and say, does that go with what this picture is here? You're trying to guide to get them to get there with that visual support, with that input. So again, we'll show this as they're talking. You've got the sentence stems here. Okay, maybe they can think of other examples. One example of a force is they might think of something other than kicking a ball. Okay, so step 3, then after you feel like everyone's got a good idea of the meaning of the word, you want them to make a visual reference, their own visual. So maybe 2 minutes, they can draw something as they're drawing. I like to move around the room and just observe to see if they're on track, ask questions, make sure they're hearing me use the word. Well, that's interesting how you drew a force here. It looks like you're drawing a pull, looks like it's is that a, what type of force is that? So they're able to hear it more and see it and try to talk about their own work using that vocabulary. So this is really kind of like the mini lesson that I think leads into your content lesson. Okay, so even before you're really getting into the content lesson, you want the students to have that understanding of that academic vocabulary so that they haven't they've acquired some of the meaning before they encounter it in the authentic text. Okay, so then this is where I had them in the training work on this themselves. Okay, so then in step 4, you're going to be moving more into your lesson, moving more into maybe this is where they're going to hear in the video. Maybe they're going to be reading in the textbook and an article, whatever. They're going to be encountering this vocabulary. So you want them to be ready for it is basically the point. So then after you have that lesson, you may want to provide some more opportunities to continue to engage in working with this vocabulary. Because remember, when you're working with this vocabulary, you're working on the content. So as you'll see here in the closed reading and the visual mix and match, it's going to continue to work on the content standard of understanding a force as a push or a pull, right? So there's not really much of a difference working on the vocabulary and working on the content, because the language is the language of the content, if that makes sense. So remember, we have students who are at different language levels in our classes. So I'm going to show you some closed reading examples that you can work on for different proficiency levels. So this would be for advanced or advanced high student. And this is a good activity to do to have the students work together, again, peer-to-peer. So here you'd have students sit, shoulder to shoulder, facing away from each other. And you have 2 readers. They each have a piece of paper. So you can see here where reader 1 is reading the first sentence, and then reader 2 has to be listening, as they've got to fill in the missing word. And obviously, you want to be very strategic about which words are missing. You're going to want to focus on those academic vocabulary words. So you'll notice here, the first sentence says there are many types of forces. Well, what's the word that's missing? forces, okay? In the next sentence, one type of force is a pull and the other is a push. So again, you've got push and pull, okay? You'll notice here that for the advanced and the advanced high, you've got extended sentences, compound sentences, transition words, language that they're ready to be exposed to, that they can meaningfully interact with, if that makes sense. So for your intermediate students, you want to simplify the language some. You still want to make sure you're using push and pull and force, but you want to make sure the language around it is simplified into shorter sentences that they're able to manage. Okay, so you can see here again, in two readers, a push is a force. A pull is a force, simplifying the language. So they don't have to keep all that extra extended thought. They're not able to manage that amount of language yet. So we want to simplify it for them. And again, they're going to work in pairs. And you could even provide, maybe you would need to provide a word bank at this level too for each reader to have access to help them fill in the blanks. So if you have beginning level students, a visual mix and match is a good activity to use. So basically a T-chart, you're going to have them separate pulls and pushes, and then there's a sentence stem at the bottom for them to practice using the vocabulary. A pull is a force. A push is a force. And again, we're working on as low as the word level with visual support where they can even identify. Maybe they're not even able to articulate that yet, but you can help them see, and you can say which one of these is a push, which one of these is a pull, and help them practice organizing the forces that way. They're all still working with the academic vocabulary, but just on different language levels. So this is... in my mind, you start with the mini lesson, you move into the authentic text, and then this is continued practice, right, after the lesson. This is how I would structure the rhythm and the flow of this lesson. Steps 5 and 6 are just basically you're continuing to interact with the text over multiple days and involving in games and playing with the words, making it fun so that it's more meaningful to the students. Again, thanks for tagging along and listening, and hope to share more with you soon on the Language Lab. Thanks for listening.